Hey, love. Welcome back. Today, we are talking about the single woman frontier, a big, scary subject, right? And also maybe a little bit exciting. So, to tackle this topic today, I have my cup of tea and my blanket, and I am so excited to sit with you. So, as we unpack the single woman frontier, I think we need to acknowledge that there are two types of frontier women, right? And I'd be so interested in your take on this. But there is the single woman who was in struggle in her marriage and knew it and did everything she knew to do to try to solve it, and eventually just got to the point where she said, like, this isn't working. It's over. And then there's the single woman who did not see this coming and did not want a divorce. And she was blindsided and is like standing in the frontier alone without any supplies or a plan. And I'm sure you know right away which woman you are. And I think it really affects how you approach the frontier, right? I think the single woman who made the choice to get a divorce, she headed into the frontier, you knew it was coming and you started to prepare yourself. For the other woman, oh man, love, I just want to wrap you in a hug because you did not sign up for this. And the frontier literally for you is one resentment after another. Because having to do hard things, having to face the unknown was not the plan. That's why you got married, right? To have a partner. And now you are having to do hard things and put your big girl panties on, as they say, but it's all laced with resentment. So even the moments of empowerment where maybe you overcame having to fix the toilet in the middle of the night, which is freaking cool that you did that, is still like, I shouldn't have had to do it. And so I think that that's something that we need to be talking about as we move through this conversation about being a single woman, because the attitude that you bring into the experience is going to dictate how your healing goes, how much resentment you feel, how hard this process is or is not. So I am so sympathetic and empathetic about what you're going through. But I think we need to borrow from each other's experiences so that, when we see one of our fellow sisters going through the process in an empowered way, we could say, like, how did you do that? Right? So let's dig into some of the things that are in the single woman frontier. So, first things first, doing everything solo and how overwhelming that is. Like, everything that maybe even if it wasn't a partnership, right? You still had help doing basic tasks, whether it was house maintenance or family issues or, putting on a bracelet. All of a sudden it's like you're doing it all, and that comes with a certain amount of overwhelm, and it takes extra bandwidth, like things that you didn't necessarily have to think about beginning to end 100%. Now you're having to think through it all, and there's a decision fatigue that comes with that. Decision fatigue is a very, very real thing. And even the fact that you don't have that person there to bounce the decisions off of, right? And so just the sheer overwhelm that comes with doing everything solo as a single woman is the first thing. The second thing that came to mind for me as a single woman was just the night. You know what I mean when I say the night? I feel like there's so much I'm saying there in just those two words. For me, I remember literally looking behind shower curtains sometimes at night, or trying to figure out how to get to sleep, or trying to figure out how to get to the hospital. All the things that happen in the night that all of a sudden when you're alone is a very, very different experience. And I don't know about for you, but for me, the night was also when I could get myself into trouble. texting that person that I didn't need to be texting, or making plans to go out to do a thing that I really probably didn't need to be doing, or overthinking and like believing my own thoughts. You know what I mean? Like the night is just, whew, it could be like not a great place for a single woman. Then I think the next thing that came to mind, which I kind of love, but again, I think depends on which frontier you're facing or which single woman you are, is the learning all the things you never thought you'd have to know. And I think at first that's daunting, but I think very quickly, if you allow it to, can be kind of intoxicating to learn about finances and mechanical things and insurance, like, just like fixing the toilet, whatever it is, right? I remember going to the Container Store in my Volkswagen convertible and coming home with these heavy metal bookshelves and figuring out how to put them together and hang it. And they didn't even fit in my Volkswagen, but I, just like all the things, lifting the things, figuring it out. And then at the end of a project, knowing that I accomplished it and I did it on my own and I didn't need him specifically, was such an intoxicating feeling when I let it be. And it certainly helped that, and we're going to talk about this throughout this episode, but it certainly helped that I made it a habit to lean in to joining, right? I just joined like so many things so that I did have people to call when I did get in a pinch, or I had people to call when I needed to learn something that I didn't know how to do. That was pretty key, having people to teach me, because then I wasn't struggling as much, and I could lean into more of that empowering bit about feeling like I accomplished some stuff. So, some of the things I accomplished very early in my singlehood was starting my own business. That was really like huge. And don't get me wrong, there were moments a couple months in where I was like, oh God, what have I done? But I did it, and I'm sure y'all have stories just like that of things that you just would never have imagined a couple of years ago that you would have accomplished, but you've done it. And I'd love to hear those stories. I would love for you to hit me up, send me a DM, and tell me the thing that you are most proud of that you have accomplished as a single woman. Those stories are so empowering for us to tell each other, because they're helpful reminders that we can do this. That's what I want you to take away from today, right? Is the whole goal of this episode is encouragement, is for you to know that you can, and that the details of what you're experiencing is exactly what we've all experienced. And yet, we are rising. And so you will continue to rise along with your sisters. The next thing I thought of when I was preparing for this episode was the emergency contact. And oh my goodness, the people I have put in my emergency contact. I don't know how your relationship is with your family. Mine, and maybe you don't live near family, or maybe, like I'm an only child. It was just a tough spot for me, the emergency contact thing. And I think that even if you have a lot of people you can put on that line, it's a triggering question, right? It's a triggering question. And I even saw someone recently post, I think just this week in the Facebook group, certain checkboxes about having to, she was filling out her passport, and she was like, why did I have to put divorced on that? Because it was 5 years ago and it's no longer relevant. And I'm sure it has something to do with the government, but I'm trying so hard to move on and let go. And it's like, I have to keep dredging up this thing, and there's shame attached to it and failure. And like, I want to be done. And why can't I just be done? So those questions about emergency contacts and those checkboxes on medical forms and stuff like that, man, that's tough stuff. And I get it. I for probably 5 years had a best friend as my emergency contact, and someone who knew my medical history, because I had a really complex medical issue at the time. And so it was tricky. I was in and out of the hospital, and man, that's really, really tough stuff. The next thing that I thought of was, I'm going to call it dating, but it's so much more than dating. Like, let's be honest. I was kind of like thinking about how cynical I was in the beginning. Like, I'm never getting married again. And is a healthy relationship even an actual thing? Or is that like the same as a Yeti? And I would ask people, like, do you actually know somebody who has a healthy relationship? Or has created a successful second marriage. And I was like on the hunt to try to figure that out. And so I really recall going from a very, very cynical place towards recovery, right? But it was such a journey. And then somewhere in the middle of all of that is the desire to be touched, to feel close physically to someone, the desire to be desired, even if you don't necessarily want to date or don't feel ready, or maybe are unsure about what your future relationship status will be. We all want physical closeness. We're hardwired for it. And so I think that's a really tricky spot that we go through in the single woman frontier. How can I navigate my physical needs, which include touch, closeness, hugs, sex, sexuality, having a sexual identity, while being single without breaking my heart even more? And those are really complicated questions and answers. And I think that they really go on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on where you are in your journey and your story. And I think that we need to talk about those things without judging each other or shaming each other, because I made a lot of mistakes in what I'm calling the dating category of being single, but those mistakes also led me to greater awareness and opportunities for healing. It showed me the places where I still didn't think enough of myself. It showed me the places where I still needed to heal, like mostly attachment related concerns, where I had like an anxious attachment style and I was craving attachment, but not in a healthy way. So it really helped reveal the next steps I needed to take in my journey. And sometimes we can't know those things until they get triggered, and that's okay. And I think it's really easy for us to, even if we don't mean to, shame each other for saying like, oh my goodness, you're dating, it's way too soon. How could you do that? Without exploring, understanding, wow, I really am curious about how you made that decision, or how you got through that, or how you made the hard choice to have sex or not have sex, or date or not date. This is tough stuff, and where we really need to listen to each other with love in our hearts. I think that some of the most important takeaways from being a single woman are the joining concept, right? Like, it's so important to join when you're single because, and I'm not talking about dating apps, but meaning places where you're cultivating support, because we can't do it alone. I couldn't do it alone. It's okay that you can't do it alone, love. We weren't built to do it alone, and you didn't sign up for that. And it's hard to join, and it takes a lot of work to sift through creating new relationships and who's really going to be there when you call. But man, I went back to church, even though I didn't necessarily stay forever, but I went back to church, and I joined Al-Anon, and I joined a personal development workshop and a women's therapy group. Like, I joined everything, and I didn't stay in it all forever. But I stuck with the places where I knew I had help and support and guidance, and as I've referenced in a previous episode, was drawn to the places where people seemed to have transformed because they had answers I needed, And so joining whatever it is, where, a meal train, where you can have help with meals, or kid pickup, or your taxes, or whatever it is, where you're going to get loved on. Because that's really what we need, right? Is to be loved on. So where can you join where you're going to be loved on by people who understand you, who are not judging you? And so you may have to be selective in that sense. We tend to go back to, our families for support, but maybe we aren't super loved on in some of those old places. And we need to really push ourselves to go to new places where we are going to be loved on more unconditionally. And another piece of advice that I often hear women who are transforming give is say yes, right? Like when people invite you to do things that are healing, say yes. If somebody invites you to a game night I'm not necessarily talking about going to the club, right? But like when you get invited to go for a walk or to try something new, say yes. Make plans, get out. Don't eclipse your own time with yourself, but say yes and connect with people. And do not try to do it all. Do not try to be a tough guy. Do not, there's this part inside of us that wants to show like, I don't need him. I can do this on my own. But that can also be a little self-defeating if we're not asking help from the people who we need the help from, right? So I know you can do this, but don't cut yourself out of the solution by trying to be too self-reliant. Have you heard that idea that being overly self-reliant is actually a trauma response? It stems from early childhood experiences of having to be too responsible. And so if you can identify with having to be really, really responsible as a young person, maybe you were a latchkey kid or, had two working parents or whatever it was, and you just had, to handle stuff as a very, very young person, whether it's an obvious trauma or maybe you're learning this for the first time, being overly self-reliant is a trauma response. So this single woman frontier is a place to challenge that, right? To not ask for help from the places where we're going to get sucked into old patterns, but to lean towards new kinds of help with people who have transformed their lives, who have healthy habits, who have integrity and have demonstrated consistency over time. So join groups. But what I want you to remember, love, is you can do this. And if you're one of the women who didn't ask for this and you didn't want this divorce and you find yourself bitter about having to do hard things, love, you got to flip that attitude, because you can work through your resentment towards him over time, and I've got you on that. Like, fine, keep that resentment burning towards him, but not towards rebuilding and transforming your own life. Don't carry that resentment into your new transformation process, because it's going to make everything painful rather than everything empowering. So if you need to make that flip and you don't know how, let's talk more about that. Feel free to hit me up in the DMs, because that's a thing that's holding you back. And if you need other ideas for where to get single woman support, right? We've got an episode coming up about finances and some resources for how to tackle finances, because I get there's so much, right? But reach out. Let's talk about it. Thanks so much for sitting with me today. I hope you heard a piece of your story in today's episode, and I look forward to sitting with you again soon. Peace. Dear Divorce Diary is a podcast by My Coach Dawn. You can find more at mycoachdawn.com.